Hello everyone, my name is Sun from Stories Untold Till Now, and today I'll be sharing 13 true horror stories from psychiatric wards that will give you the creeps. This is by Occult Museum. Now I found this article and I found it very, very interesting, and I can't wait to share the stories. All the credits are in the article itself, and I will be attaching it below. Alright, let's get into it. Number 1, Holding Her Own Eyes. My mom told me this story from her time at a neuropsychiatric ward while she was in grad school. She was making her routine room checks and happened upon the most horrific scene I've ever heard. This was during the night shift, and generally all the patients' bedroom doors should have been closed. So my mom turned a corner and noticed an open door. She saw a staff member's leg on the floor halfway out the doorway. When she looked into the room, she saw the patient, a woman with severe postpartum psychiatric disorder who had just gouged out both of her own eyes with her bare hands. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, holding her eyes in her hands. The first member to witness the scene, who was now laying face down on the floor, had a heart attack when he first witnessed the woman while she was making his rounds. My mom screamed for help and frantically performed CPR on the staff member. All the while, the woman just sat there rather calmly, holding her own eyes. Number 2. The Saw. I work as a psychotherapist in a hospital system. My definition of creepy is probably quite a bit different from other medical professionals. The one that got me the most was the patient who came to us after attempting suicide by sawing both of his arms off at the forearm with a table saw. His arms were reattached, fairly successful too, with only limited impairments in mobility. All I could think about was how bad it would have been to live in his head, that sawing his arms off seemed much better than that. He has since completed suicide. Number 3. Jane? We had a young lady in our custody with quite a few issues. We call her Jane. Jane's first night at our facility, staff doing a bed check found Jane in a puddle of blood. Turns out Jane had been slicing the skin around her shin with her fingernails and pulling her skin up to her leg, essentially degloving her calf. Jane also had a ritual she performed every night before bed. While she was in the room, she would run between the walls in her room, touching them in a crucifix pattern. After doing this for a few hours, she would sit on the bed and go to sleep. This particular night, though, Jane was frantic in her pace, practically running between walls. Our night staff observed the entire interaction and reported Jane screaming late into the night. When the staff went to check on Jane, she reported Jane standing in the doorway, smiling. The staff asked what was wrong, and Jane replied, "What makes you think you are speaking to Jane?" Number 4. The Vampire. My mom worked in a mental institutions in her younger years, and actually worked at a large, well-known asylum before it was shut down. There was one woman there that thought she was a vampire of sorts. She was only allowed out 1 hour a day, and they had to use all safety precautions. She had already attacked and killed at least one hospital worker before these were enacted. When my mom asked about her, it was revealed that she had killed at least 2 of her children, wounded another one as well as her husband because she had some sort of physical condition called porphyria, which apparently made her crave blood. By the time they discovered that there was something physically wrong with her, she had already lost her mind from guilt and grief. Number 5. The Spitter. I'm not a psychologist, but my friend is. She told me about a patient of hers who was an HIV positive and a paranoid schizophrenic. He thought that the nurses who worked at the hospital he was in were trying to kill him, so he'd frequently bite his tongue and spit HIV-positive blood into their faces/mouths. When they had come into contact with him, they were required to wear full gloves and masks. Number 6. The Only One. I once knew a woman who had spent part of her residency at a psychiatric hospital for people with severe mental conditions. Apparently, the grounds had a lovely enclosed greenhouse. One day, one of their schizophrenic patients was sitting on a bench, smoking a cigarette, as heron frantically flew around. It had found its way, and not being able to escape, it was smashing into the large panes of glass. The man just sat there watching. Finally, my counselor asked him if the bird was bothering him, and he kind of sighed and said, "Thank God. I thought I was the only one seeing that." Number 7. Family photographs. My sister's the director of a psychiatric hospital. There was recently a lady there who would cut her arms and legs and torso open and place photographs of her family under her skin. Number 8. Under the bed. Once, a fellow female patient once told me she found writings under her bed. They were just old, small wooden bed frames and hard mattresses that would make these kinds of noises when you rolled over. But I still wondered what exactly she was doing lying under the bed to find these writings. When she first told me, I thought it was a joke, but sure enough, one day during group, we managed to sneak away, and she showed me. Indeed, there were stories written under her bed, and after that, we had checked everyone under their own beds, and there was more writing under every single bed. They were stories of patients who had stayed there before, or ways they were planning on killing themselves, or who the good and bad nurses were. It creeps me out. Number 9. Time of death. Well, my mother was a nurse that specialized in geriatrics. She worked for several hospice hospitals for many years. She often described situations at her work with several of the patients. She would say that each person tends to have similar checklists that they follow right before death. The checklist often end up in a similar way. They would get caught talking to someone that wasn't there. When they'd ask who was otherwise lucid people were talking to, they would describe an individual who was relatively dead. When asked what they were talking about, they would say the relative wanted to know if they were ready to move on. A pretty common response would be, "Yeah, he/she said that she will take me tomorrow at 3 p.m. Well, it would often happen that they would die at the exact same time that their relatives quoted. Number 10. The test subject. I had an hour-long conversation with a delusional guy who was confined to a mental health facility. He was probably smarter than I am. Lots of these folks believe that somebody, often the CIA, is either beaming thoughts into their heads or implanted a microchip in their brains for its purpose. This guy was offering a very thoughtful argument as to why such claims should not be so quickly dismissed. It's precisely because such delusions are so common that mental patients make the best test subject, he said. There he was, confined and protected, constantly observed, his health and behavior documented, and there's zero chance that anyone would ever take his concern seriously. How else would you test and improve such technology? Does the government not have a strong motivation and plausible ability to create such a device? You can see I am not irrational, the man said. I'm just straight up telling you that they are doing this to me. I know just how unbelievable it sounds, and yet, here I am. Number 11. The boy who loved knives. As a tech in a psych years ago, there was a 7-year-old kid sent to the floor because the mom didn't know what to do with him. Sadly, common thing to happen even if kids don't have psych issues. Anyway, the mom was shaking and crying, and they had to take the kid into another room. She was genuinely afraid of her own son. She had suspected something was wrong when she kept finding mutilated animals in the backyard, but never heard or saw coyotes or anything around. The neighbor's smaller pets started disappearing. The boy had an obsession with knives, hiding them around the knife, denying anything when the mom confronted him. Then, when the two started getting to arguments, he would get really violent and hit her, push her down and kick her, threaten to kill her. On multiple occasions, she woke up in the middle of the night with him standing beside her bed, staring at her in the face. She put extra locks on her bedroom door to feel safe while she slept. The last straw was when she lifted his mattress and found 50+ knives of all shapes and sizes under there. So she brought him to us. I remember talking to him, treating him like he was just another kid that came through. He seemed remarkably normal, until you spoke directly to him. He had his way of looking right through you, or maybe like he didn't see you at all while you were speaking. He would respond like a robot. He was just saying words because that's what we wanted to hear, and he would always put on this creepy, sad-looking smile. Like all mouth and no eye involvement in the smile, especially when he could get away with something, like taking another kid's markers and they couldn't figure it out. Still gives me the chills, laying here thinking about him. I believe I met a 7-year-old psychopath. Number 12. The new mom. I was a pharmacy technician at a hospital with a psych ward for some time. We would have to go around in a cart and dispense the patient's medications, and being a 5'2" girl, a security guard or male nurse would accompany me, just as a precaution. I never had any real issues other than the occasional death grip on my arm or manic outbursts, but there was one boy who was entirely different. His chart said he was 9, he had pale skin, dark hair, and huge, bright green eyes. He always greeted me in the most polite way, asked how I was doing, and always found something different to compliment me on every single time. He was extremely well-spoken and mature for his age, so I began looking forward to seeing him, as normal small talk is definitely cherished in that setting. If he saw me outside of his room in the halls, he made sure to say hello and always call me Miss Jones or Ma'am. One day, a couple of our female nurses saw me to pause to chat with him in the hallway and waved me over to ask if I was out of my mind. Apparently, When he was in kindergarten, he grew an intense attachment to his young female teacher. This escalated to the point of him calling her mom and leaving notes for her about how he wished he were her son. He had a normal home life with both parents, and the teacher tried to explain to him that she couldn't be his mom because that would hurt his real mother's feelings, and that she already had a job covered. So he went home, killed his own mother in her sleep by cutting her throat, so his teacher could be his mom. The female staff had a general rule of not interacting with him excessively to prevent any kind of attachment from forming. Number 13. Bugs. Nothing I can say can possibly describe the year I worked at a psychiatric intensive care. Creepy isn't the thing that comes to mind when I think about it. More heartbreaking and horrifying, but creepiness was a part of it, especially evening and night shifts, naturally. There's always something disturbing about watching someone while they hallucinate. You can tell it's 100% real to them, and something about it makes you believe it on some level. A lot of stories end with, of course I had to look over my shoulder to make sure. You see the emotions it brings out. There was a woman that came in and sat across the table from me for her admission interview. She had bandages all over her arms, scotch tape over her mouth and ears. She looked very uncomfortable and really wouldn't sit still. When the nurse would ask her a question, she would peel the corner of the tape back and answer, then stick the tape back on really fast. We eventually found out that she saw and felt bugs crawling all over her, and they were trying to get inside her body. The tape was to keep the bugs out. The bandages were because some of the bugs got in and she had to dig them out. She couldn't sit still because she felt the bugs all over her even while we sat and talked. The worst part was, she had some idea that it was her mind playing tricks on her. Can you imagine going through your life, feeling like someone is continuously dumping buckets of cockroaches on your head, feeling like they're all over you, getting inside you to the point you're digging chunks of your flesh out in panic, all while knowing intellectually that none of it was real? Alright guys, these are the 13 stories from the psychiatric ward. If you have any questions or concerns, or if you have anything else you'd like me to go ahead and narrate for you guys, let me know. As always, stay sunny.